Hi everyone, my name's Maggie. In this presentation, I will be introducing an ongoing project by my colleagues and I aimed at modeling the impact of extreme climatic events on the provisioning of lake ecosystem services. The 2018 Regional Assessment Report for Europe and Central Asia from the IPBES listed the inland surface water habitats of Europe and Asia as threatened as a result of the combined pressures of anthropogenic actions, such as intensification of agricultural practices and heavy urbanization, along with climate change. Europe in particular was noted to have only 53% of lakes and rivers in good ecological status, the management target set by the Water Framework Directive for all of Europe. Now, as climatic change trends continue, the increasing intensity and frequency of extreme climatic events is a cause for further concern regarding these systems. The occurrence of these events has the capacity to affect the typical functioning of aquatic ecosystems through alteration of precipitation timing and amount, disruption of nutrient cycling processes, changes in the biological food web, and more. A lot of studies have been dedicated to understanding the connection between extreme events and their impact on the functioning and processes of ecosystems. Equally important and less studied is the effect that extreme events can have on our ability to utilize the lake. Ecosystem services, or the value humans receive from the tangible goods and intangible processes and experiences originating from natural ecosystems, can be provided by lakes. However, the provision of these services, and therefore the subsequent values that we receive, are dependent on the lake's functions. When the capacity of a lake to conduct different processes is disrupted, the ability of humans to utilize different services may be affected. And as our societal, cultural, economic, and environmental aspects of our society can be dependent on the reliable provision of different services, supporting continued lake functioning is important. Therefore, understanding the pathway and the impact that extreme climatic events can have on ecosystems is the first step in combating the negative consequences that these intensified events can have on our systems and their uses. In this study, we will be addressing two questions. The first is, how can we predict the implications that extreme climatic events may have on ecosystem services? If we can trace the cause-effect chain from the event all the way to the service provision, then we can attain an understanding of how projected climate trends may impact the timing and availability of the services that we use. The second question is, how can we get to evidence-based decision-making with lake management? Once we can follow the cause-effect chain, this information can be used to inform the development of management action plans with firm evidence. As a result, we can identify which ecosystem processes support the provision of our specific ecosystem services, and then begin building resilience into our lakes. Our team is taking a two-step approach with the use of a model in order to address our questions. With the first step, we will be looking into the ecosystem functions and processes of a lake system. We will be using the model PC Lake Plus to assess the impact that different extreme climatic event scenarios will have on the parameters of a virtual lake system. The second step of our approach will be looking into the capacity for a system to provide ecosystem services. In this step, we will be taking the parameter data provided by PC Lake Plus as input data for assessing whether the lake's current condition is capable of providing various services or not. Within this step, we will be reviewing this capability for the different types of services: provisioning, such as with food and building materials; regulating, including water purification and carbon storage; cultural services, like recreation and spiritual significance; and supporting services, such as nutrient cycling. For those unfamiliar with this model, PC Lake's emphasis is on ecological processes. The original model and its successor, PC Lake Plus, are comprised of interactions with the biotic and the abiotic components of lakes. As seen in this diagram depicting the components of the model, there are multiple connections that simulate interactions through the food web and with different nutrients. Also, and unique to PC Lake Plus, there is now the capacity to model separate epilimnion and hypolimnion sections of the lake profile, making the assessment of stratified as well as mixed profiles possible. As explained in Jansen et al., this model was, quote, extended with a hypolimnion layer that can be invoked and configured by forcing functions or by simple built-in empirical relationships that impose stratification, end quote. Additionally, this change from the preceding PC Lake model's one-layer structure lets, quote, both water layers have their own state variables for nutrients, oxygen, three groups of algae, detritus, inorganic matter, and zooplankton, end quote. Here we have an image of the PC Lake Plus control page wherein the parameters of interest can be viewed for different modeling scenarios. As shown on the previous slide, there are a range of biotic and abiotic parameters that can be utilized to model different lake scenarios. We have been working with parameters such as lake mixing depth, epilimnion temperature, stream inflow, and phosphorus loading to build the extreme climatic event scenarios thus far. However, there are abundant more parameters that can be used to run the model for varying research questions. All of those parameters can be modeled on different timescales, from hours to hundreds of years, depending on the frequency that the data are reported in. This makes it feasible to run high-frequency data for a continuous period of time or for specific parts of years, such as summers, across numerous decades, in order to assess how a scenario of interest will play out. For direct comparisons of how different scenarios will affect the virtual lake, PC Lake Plus offers the ability to run up to 4 scenarios simultaneously and for these outcomes to be shown on the same graph by parameter. Take, for instance, a situation in which we wanted to model how a management action to reduce phosphorus input into a system would affect specific parameters. In one model scenario, the phosphorus load could be kept at standard levels. In the second, we can input data for a reduced load of phosphorus going into the system. From there, we can run both of the scenarios side by side to view the difference that the reduced loading would have within the virtual lake profile. In our case, we can view the long-term effects within an extreme event can have on a lake. Through PC Lake Plus, we can draw the connection from extreme climatic events to ecosystem functions. The second step in our approach will extend this cause-effect chain to include the ecosystem services of a lake. Let's take a break for a second to consider your favorite use of your favorite lake. While there may be many important services that lakes can offer, I would hazard a guess that most people first think of and enjoy the cultural and provisioning services. To be fair, I'm one of those people that immediately thinks of boating, swimming, and skiing. Unfortunately, not all of the ecosystem services can be available due to limitations of resources, to not having enough space in the lake, or with the timing of competing services coinciding. That raises the question, how can we know when we will be able to utilize a specific service? To begin with, we can identify the conditions when a particular service is available. Take sport fishing, for example. Under what conditions is a lake suitable? On the day, one of the factors that can impede or support this service is the percentage of macrophyte cover in benthivorous fish habitats. When there is a large percentage of the benthic zone covered by macrophytes, as shown on the left, it can be challenging to fish. For instance, the fish have abundant places to hide. Hooks can get tangled in the vegetation, and there is decreased visibility for fish to spot the lure. On the other hand, smaller percentages of macrophyte cover could promote more potential for a successful fishing day. In a similar manner, other conditions affecting the success of sport fishing can be assessed and quantified. This is what we did in the study Seelan et al. With defining the conditions when services are available or not. In this study, we were looking at how to quantify the capacity of a lake for providing ecosystem services. Our approach was the following. First, ecosystem services that could potentially be provided by a quarry lake were identified. For this, the Common International Classification of Ecosystem Services database, developed by the European Environment Agency, was consulted. This extensive database has compiled internationally standardized ecosystem services for a range of habitats. 20 of the listed services were identified as relevant quarry lake services. Following the identification of services, literature sources and expert knowledge were consulted for conditions in which the service would or would not be available in these lakes. 22 parameters that would affect one or more of the ecosystem services in question were identified as relevant for the service's provision. Quantified values of the parameters were provided for when a service would or would not be provided by a lake. Depicted here is a section of the table. Here we can see the ecosystem services of professional fishing in a fish pond, provision of edible plants, and provision of common reed for thatching material. The leftmost column is part of the list of parameters that could affect service provisioning along with the parameters units. The dashed lines in the chart indicate that there is not a direct correlation between the parameter and the ecosystem services provisioning. Where there are values, they are categorized as suitable or unsuitable. Occasionally, there is a third categorization for moderately suitable. The numbers indicated in these columns show the values for when the service in question is likely to be provided or not. As part of this study, a case study on a quarry lake in the Netherlands was conducted. The 20 ecosystem services relevant for a quarry lake system were taken from the table shown previously. Important to note about this lake is that there is data from 1992 to 2014. Additionally, a management action to reduce phosphorus loading within the system through the application of lock and lock was implemented in 2009. Therefore, there is a distinct difference in the state of the ecosystem before and after the management intervention was introduced. Using the lake data, the different before and after time periods could be assessed for which ecosystem services were available based on the parameter values. An overview of the results can be seen in the chart on the right. With a resulting chart like this, it is possible to use this knowledge regarding the possibility of ecosystem services being provided in the different lake states to support management actions. For instance, with the known connection between a parameter and a specific service of interest, tailored management action plans can be created to foster the continued conditions in which the service is available. In recap of this two-step approach, we have gone over how PC Lake Plus will model extreme climatic event scenarios within a virtual lake and provide output data on how the different parameters have been affected by the occurrence. We've also gone over the table of quantified parameters of lakes to identify provisioning of services. It is with the second part of our approach that the output data from PC Lake Plus can be used to assess whether under the model conditions the services will be able to be provided. With this, we can have a full linked cause-effect chain on how the extreme events may impact ecosystem services. In conjunction with the IGB, the extreme climatic event models that we have been creating are specifically for Lake Müggelsee, a lake located towards the southeast of Berlin, Germany. We are in the process of creating 3 simulations for tracing an extreme event to the effect on ecosystem functions. These scenarios are an extreme heat wave, an extreme drought, and a combination of the 2 events coinciding. Our aim for this model is to be accessible and easy to customize for lakes globally given the correct input data. Namely, an adaptation of this 2-step model approach for a specific lake will require adjustments by specifying the regional specific scenarios regarding extreme climatic events and the adjustments of the parameters of PC Lake Plus with data for the specific lake. With tracing the link from extreme events to service provisioning, this tool can assist in supporting evidence-based decision-making regarding our lakes in an uncertain time. Thank you.